Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th and final round. From Southern California, this is the Last Round Podcast.
Episode 74, right, Mike? Episode 74 of the Last Round.
That's it.
Mike's been doing this, the last 2 weeks alone because of all that's kind of going on. We've been trying to be a little bit, I guess, responsible. Is that a good, appropriate word, Mike? What do you think?
Yeah, sticking to those California social distancing laws.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully this all kind of ends very soon, and I mean, seems like it's getting worse and worse by the day. Just especially if you watch in the news, if you're a news junkie. But we're here again. I'm back. I know Mike's been writing solo the last couple of weeks with some guests, but we're back as a team here on the Last Round. So we appreciate you listening, whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or Boxing Social YouTube. We just recently jumped on a partnership with them, so we appreciate that. And this week we have another guest, not in studio because actually we're doing this remotely, but we have a guest joining us from New York City. He's actually from Brooklyn. I'm sure boxing fans know exactly who he is because he's always front and center at a lot of fights. It's him, Jimmy Lennon Jr., Michael Buffer. Would you say, Mike, are the three main announcers in the game today in terms of boxing?
Yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So David Diamante is joining us this week. Thanks a lot for joining us, David.
Guys, it's a pleasure to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So, just right off the bat, how you dealing with what's going on right here in the world and with no boxing?
Well, it's interesting. The first thing I want to say is just, feeling for the people that are going through a hard time with this whole coronavirus and the COVID-19 situation. I myself personally know at least 5 people that have passed, and some people that are pretty close to me. So I understand the pain and I know what it's about. A lot of my friends are sick with this here in New York. So I know that this is real and people are going through it. So first and foremost is about people's health. So I hope everyone's doing okay around the country, around the world. But that being said, we're here to talk about boxing. So it's, obviously we had a massive 2020 lined up and that's all being put on hold. But I expect that when this thing does, open back up, the floodgates are going to open. We're going to have a lot of great fights. So hopefully we'll do that. I think this is a great time that people can maybe catch up on some old fights. There's always so many great old fights to watch, and there's never a dull moment. There's a lot of stuff to go back and catch up on.
Absolutely. And you're right. Obviously our thoughts are with all the families and people affected, by this horrible disease. And, we hope there's light at the end of the tunnel sooner rather than later. But like you said, we're here to talk about some boxing. We know in previous interviews, obviously you've talked about how you came into the sport, how you came in as an announcer, your career, how you got into it. But for our audience or some of maybe the fans who are listening to this episode right now who aren't aware of your trajectory in your career into the sport, can you just kind of give us an overview from the beginning, why you wanted to become an announcer and what brought you into the sport?
Well, I always loved boxing, and I used to box myself, and I figured I'd be a better announcer, and I think I was right. I think that's what I'm better at. Being in the ring is a great thing, but I think I'm better with the mic than with the gloves. So, but I have a lot of respect for the fighters, after having moved around the ring a bunch and, trained at different gyms. And I lived out in California for a long time. I used to train out at King's Gym in East Oakland. And then I trained at Grinelli's, and I trained at a bunch of different gyms out there. And then, of course, here on the East Coast, too. And so I had a background in music. I was a professional drummer. I was a DJ at a radio station for a lot of years, like back in the day. I did a lot of different things with kind of entertainment, and knowing boxing and loving boxing. It was really one of those situations where I always loved, I literally thought to myself one day, what's the best job in the world? Mm-hmm. And I thought, wow, being a ring announcer, that's got to be the best job ever. And I always loved the pageantry of, Ed Darien and Mark Biro and Johnny Addy and all the old school announcers, Chuck Hull, and just seeing these guys. I just loved the old school announcers. And I thought that, hey, that's a great gig. And I get to, it's basically, just getting where you fit in, right? Like, mm-hmm. It's like playing a game of dominoes, getting where you fit in and figure out, like, what you're good at. And I was always good with talking, never worried about talking in front of crowds. And I was on the mic in studios and in nightclubs, and I knew a lot about boxing. So I just kind of put it together, and that's what I decided to do. But to be really honest, I never made any money doing it. I didn't do it as a career. It was just something to do for fun, because I was actually having a really successful career as a DJ, and I was doing very well. So I didn't need to make money. And I never thought that I would even be put on TV, because my dreads, I've been growing my dreadlocks I haven't cut my hair since 1988.
Oh, wow.
So actually, speaking of 88, I haven't cut my hair since 88, but you guys' show is called The Last Round, right?
Right.
Yes.
And the last round of boxing is obviously the 12th and final round, but 88 was when it switched from 15 rounds.
That's right. Yeah.
It's just a little thing I'll just throw right in there.
That's right.
Anyway,
No. Yeah. That we've never put two and two together like that. That's true.
You know what I mean?
That was a good segue. Anyway, I like it.
so anyway, but back to the story. Like I have these long dreadlocks, and I just figured, they'll never put me on TV, with hair like this. So, and I didn't care. I didn't do it for that. I did it for the love of the sport. And I worked in the amateurs for many years here in New York. I did the PALs and the Golden Gloves and the Metros. And I mean, I did so many different amateur tournaments and fights, and I did it for years. And then all of a sudden it just blew up. And it was crazy, because once I got to the big stage, like all these people were like, yo, this guy's great. And I'm like, really? Okay, cool. I mean, but I had so many relationships with so many people in boxing, because we were like a family. Like I've been doing it for so long that the trainers, the cut men, the cornermen, the timekeepers, the refs, the doctors, the commissions, like you know everybody, because you work with them and you travel around, and it's just what it was. So I had those relationships for so long, and it was a great thing. It was a great thing. So that's really how it happened, and it sprouted. And then of course, JayZ chose me to be the voice of the Brooklyn Nets, which was amazing. So I did that for 6 seasons. I called the NBA also, but it was hard for me because, my first passion and my first love is really boxing. And and at this point, my profile was getting a lot higher, and I was getting offered a lot of very big fights, and I had to turn a lot of stuff down because of the NBA. So when it came time to re-up my contract, I decided to go with the boxing instead. And that's what I did. And now obviously I'm signed with, Eddie Hearn and Matchroom, and we do the fights on Dazn and Sky Sports, and we're all over the world.
David, do you have an interesting story on how you actually became the voice of the Brooklyn Mets as well? You beat off 400 people, I believe.
Yeah. There was
what?
Yeah, there was. It was a big deal when the Nets were coming to New York. They were looking for a new voice, and so they did this open audition. And over 400 people came out, and I was the last man standing. So,
dang.
But I mean, I felt for sure like this is my gig, because and like it's not that I don't love basketball. I love basketball, and especially now, obviously, I know a lot about it. And being in the NBA, my love for the sport grew a lot deeper, and I ended up learning a ton, and I met some wonderful, wonderful people over the years. But it was my love of Brooklyn, and the fact that it was the first sports team coming since the Dodgers left and went out to Los Angeles, where you guys are.
Right.
And it was just one of those things, and it was like an historic thing. And I thought, to be able to represent my borough, my town, that would be a great thing. And it was great. And I was also the voice of the Barclays Center. So we did so many great fights at the Barclays. And that was at the time when the Barclays really became the premier venue in the world for boxing. I would say it's probably not that anymore. Now it's going a lot back to the Garden, the O2. I mean, there's all kinds of different venues around the world. Now they're doing a lot of great fights. But at the time, Barclays was like on fire. I mean, we were doing so many fights. So it was a great time.
So David, you mentioned you beat out 400 people, and Mike mentioned it as well. And you also mentioned, obviously, a lot of people, I mean, boxing fans who aren't familiar with the NBA, especially the Brooklyn Nets, JayZ is an owner. I'm not sure if he's like a part owner or sole owner, but I know he's involved somehow. Can you tell us the first time that you were able to meet him and what he told you? Like, I'm assuming he was aware of your work by that point?
Well, I met JayZ way before I ever worked for the Nets. So, I'm a Brooklyn cat. So, but it's just, he's not an owner anymore. He's got Rock Nation Sports. So that's a what is it, a conflict of interest, right? You can't be an owner, an agent. So he had to sell his stake. He was a minority share owner, but the thing about what he did was big for the borough because he was a big mouthpiece for Brooklyn, and he really supported the borough, and he was a big deal in getting the Nets over here. And at the time, it was Bruce Ratner was the owner, and Mikhail Prokhorov. So it was a really big deal. Now I think JayZ is the owner of the Nets. I'm not with the team anymore. Neither is he. But I was able to do work with Rock Nation Sports too when they were doing their boxing stuff. So yeah.
David, what would you say that I mean, because obviously you've done DJing, DJ gigs, boxing, NBA, and who would you say, or what field would you say would be the weirdest type of field that somebody's approached you to announce for them, whether it was an event or what have you?
That's funny. That's a funny question. I like that question. What have I announced that's really funny? Well, I've done some work with this. There's a calisthenics thing called the what is it? The Ultimate Fitness League, the UFL, Ultimate Fitness League. So, but these guys are incredible, man. They're doing like pull-ups and all kinds of great calisthenics. So I've done that, and I mean, I've announced a lot of stuff. I've been asked to announce tennis. I hosted a show on NBC. So some people don't know that, but I had a TV show also. It was called The Lights, which is short for the highlights. And so basically what we did was, I say we, it was my show. I was the host. So basically it was NBC's version of SportsCenter. And the whole idea, it was a 20-minute show, and it ran 3 times every hour. So they'd run it back to back to back to back. And basically it was like we'd hit every sport, like everything that happened in major sports. So basically when you're shaving, when you're showering, when you're getting ready for work, you can just catch all the highlights of the show. But it was a TV show. So we had, it was like SportsCenter without the fluff, without the jokes.
Right.
And I did that for a year. We shot it for a whole year. So we shot a lot of episodes, over 200 episodes. And it was great. But the NBC Sports Network, they decided to, go in a different direction with that show. They cut the show, not because it had good reviews, but they didn't, at the time they bought the Versus Network, which was like the OLN network. And they had a lot of they had some crazy stuff on there. Like they had old contracts, like fishing shows and hunting shows. And then I used to come on right after the Dan Patrick show.
Oh, wow.
Or I think it was before the Dan Patrick show. So yeah, it was cool. I mean, it was a lot of fun. So you never know, but I've announced quite a few things.
So you've dipped your hand in multiple different things that I'm sure at least a lot of boxing fans aren't aware. I mean, you were a DJ, Brooklyn Nets, boxing, NBC Sports. I mean, what's next?
Well, to be honest with you, I mean, there's been a lot more than that too. I also own Diamante's Brooklyn Cigar Lounge here in Brooklyn,
Right,
so I got
right.
my own line of cigars. But that's, to be honest with you, I'm really trying to hone strictly on boxing now.
Hmm.
I mean, I'm open. I'm into doing different things, but boxing really is my passion, and I want to stay true to that. And that's what I've been doing. And just like this last couple years. With Dazn and with Matchroom have really been a dream. I mean, I've been announcing fights all over the world, from all across the United States and Mexico, Spain, Italy, Germany, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Monaco, Italy, all through the UK. I mean, we do fights all across the UK. I don't think fans really understand how often I'm over there. We're doing Birmingham, we're doing Newcastle, we're doing London. We're doing Liverpool, Sheffield. There's just so many great towns over there, and the fans are incredible, and doing a lot of great fights in the UK, and the boxing scene over there is buzzing,
Right.
And the fans are really knowledgeable. So it's been great to just, because that's one thing I really love also about our sport is it's a worldwide sport. So it's great to be able to go around the world and connect with the fans around the world, and to be able to do all those fights. So that's really my future, I think, is just being the voice of boxing, really being the voice of boxing, because I feel like it's really important that we have our sport is, the people like you two and like me and like the people listening, because you're not going to be listening to this unless you're not a diehard fan.
Right.
It's like we're a niche sport, and we got to have people to prop our sport up and to be, flag bearers and to wave the flag for our sport. And hopefully I can be that, and to just try to carry it to the next generation.
So, David, you mentioned the Brooklyn Cigar Lounge that you own, and you're obviously a big fan of cigars. And this just kind of popped into my head. Is there any one fighter or one boxing personality in the sport that's a big cigar fan, just as much as you are, and you've had conversations with them about different types of cigars, or if they maybe come to your cigar lounge?
Oh man, a ton of them. I mean, all the way going back to Burt Sugar to,
Wow.
James Buddy McGirt to, there's tons, Ronaldo Snipes, and just so many different guys. But to be honest with you, I just shut down my spot in Brooklyn because I had it for over 10 years. It was there for 10 years. I shut it down, and I was just about to open a new spot right next to Madison Square Garden.
Wow.
And we were literally in a lease negotiation when this whole lockdown happened.
Oh.
And we put it on hold. So we'll see what happens. But right now, to be honest with you, it's just, I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, we need to wait to see with the economy, but right now that's put on hold. So it's strictly boxing, man. Strictly boxing.
One more, Mike. Well, David, when were you told by like Dazn, like by the Dazn brass or anything, that that operations were going to cease for the time being, or did you? I mean, obviously everybody saw it like on the news, and you could kind of see the writing on the wall. But when did Dazn kind of let you know, like, hey, you know what, we're going to just have to wait this out and get back on our feet when we can?
Well, to be honest with you, I know that their whole stance is the health of the fighters and the people that are involved. So we did a fight in England. I did a fight. What fight was that? I can't even remember now. I did a fight in Manchester not too long ago. It was last month. And when I came back, so we did a fight in Texas. So we had the fight in Texas in Frisco. That was the Mikey Garcia fight, Jesse Vargas. And then I flew out to Manchester and I did the fight out there. And then I flew home, and that's when things started getting squirrely. And I was like, all right, this is going to get weird. And it was just, everyone's just kind of put on hold. And I think what really did it was when the British Boxing Board of Control said, okay, look, this is when events have to get shut down. And then it was like 100%. But, we were all kind of holding out hope that maybe this wasn't going to be as bad as people thought, or maybe would, start to subside or something like that. But I think once the governing bodies were saying, hey, listen, this is going to have to shut down, I think we all knew the writing was on the wall. And also the Pro Gray Hooker fight at the MGM, that got postponed also.
I know. That's yeah. I hope that fight is still, going to happen, because that's going to be an exciting fight. Pro Gray and Hooker, that's going to be a great fight. Mike, you had something?
100%.
I was just going to say, David, what do you think distinguishes you in your field? Because obviously you got selected to work for Top Rank, Matchroom, Golden Boy. You also announced for the World Boxing Super Series.
Yeah. I mean, shoot, I've announced for a lot of different promoters around the world, and it's been a wonderful experience. But I think a lot of different things distinguish me. I think that obviously my look, I think my voice, but I think it's probably none of that is the most important. I think a lot of it has to do with what I hope is the passion, because when I'm announcing a fight, I can't explain enough how, like, I'm so excited to be doing it and to be there. Again, like, I think there's a difference when people get into something for the money, or they get into it for the fame. That's fine. There's nothing against that. But, my motivation in getting into boxing was never any of that at all. And it's just kind of happened, but it's because I really, truly love it. Like, anyone that knows me, I mean, I've been watching fights since I've been a little kid. So, and, I don't like to call myself a boxing historian, but a lot of people have called me that. I mean, I'm really into the game. I'm really into the old fights, the new fights, and everything in between. This sport fascinates me on a level that very few things can. And, I'm a guy, I travel vastly throughout the world, not just for the boxing, but as a traveler. Been to many countries around the world, and I see a lot of things, but boxing still fascinates me. It's so brutally beautiful. I mean, our sport is horrific in a lot of ways, and it's so beautiful in a lot of ways. It's a really incredible thing, and that's why I'm just fascinated with it. And so when I'm announcing a fight, I'm hoping that my passion comes through and the fans get a little bit about what I feel when I'm in there. And I think that's what makes me a great announcer. It's just the passion,
How is it you actually prepare for the events? Do you write down the people's names, listen to them, understand the pronunciation?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. It's funny, like, talking about like a guy like JayZ or his wife Beyonce. All these kids want to be rappers or singers or dancers, or they want to be a football player, basketball player, a boxer, a ring announcer, whatever they want to be, because they see it looks easy, right? Like, it looks like you just kind of go in there and you just kind of talk and boom, 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 right? Like, all JayZ does is go up there and he just raps, right? Steps down. But there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that people don't see. And to be honest, I personally don't want them to necessarily see that. I want them to think it's so smooth and so easy, and that I just go in there and just boom, it just comes off. They don't need to see that. But the truth of the matter is, in anything you do, you got to show up early and leave late, and you got to bust your ass, because there's always someone out there that's hungrier and harder and wants to do it. And so, you got to really be the top of your game. And to me, like, living in a place like New York City, one thing I love is, like, cream always rises to the top. And so it's like everything from, the clothes that I wear to the preparation, and the preparation could be watching tons of different fights, talking to different people, getting pronunciations, learning different languages. I mean, it's basically like, you've got like this freaking utility belt on with all these skills that you've learned throughout your life. And that's what comes into it. I mean, even with the audio stuff, being a DJ in a club and being in recording in music studios and running light systems and doing live events all around the world and in nightclubs all across the country. these are all things and all skills that have come into effect. And being a cat, being able to land on your feet at all times, because I can't tell you how many times, and I'll be doing an event and behind the curtain is like this massive forest fire, and people have no idea, but I step out on the stage and I'm like, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome. And it's smooth as butter. And people are like, everything's fine. Like no one has an idea of the forest fires going on behind the stage. They have no idea that it's a complete shit show, but they don't have to know that because I'm the catalyst, between the crowd and the audience and the promoter. So no matter what happens, I need to be smooth. So it's like always about wearing my belt and my suspenders. It's really similar to like being a fighter. I always say this, like, a fight is won very far away from the bright lights. By the time you get into the ring to fight, that's the easy part. You just went through months of rigorous training and sparring and diet and just horrific conditions. You just want that fight to happen. Mm-hmm. And it's very similar to being a ring announcer on a very different level, obviously physically, but the preparation, you've got to go over everything, 100 times. And then that way, when you go in, it's just completely smooth. So yeah. And sometimes you can't do that. So by having this many years of experience, you're able to be able to do things on the fly, because like I'll step into the ring and I'll literally sometimes get a sponsor handed to me at the very last second. I've had fights change last second, and you have to go in there and smile and just be smooth about it.
What would you say is the most difficult thing about sports announcing?
Well, it's just, to me, there's a ton of difficult stuff about it, but it's not difficult if you love it. That's why, it all sounds very cliche. People are like, oh, follow your passion and do what you're passionate about. But it's really kind of true, because for me, like in my off time, like I'm watching fights, I'm talking to fighters, like I'm doing things that involve boxing, not because it's my work, it's because I love it. And the schedule that I've had the last couple of years, if people even saw my flight itineraries and the amount of times I've crossed the ocean, they'd literally think I was a crazy man. But and people always ask me, they're like, how do you do that? How do you do that? I'm in Bogota, Colombia. I fly up to Texas that same day. I'm in San Diego. Then I'm down to Tijuana. Then I'm flying out to there's crazy itineraries that I've done, but I'm fine. I love it because it's like, dude, I'm sitting ringside at the fights. Like I'm with the fighters. I'm watching these fights. I'm involved with this stuff. And, what I love about it, I'm like a really big movie buff also. I'm really into film. And to me, what makes a great film is character development, right? It's like building up stories. So you could have like a great film with all these like big explosions, but if you don't know who the people in the film are, you don't really care. So it's the same in boxing. Like if you don't know who these fighters are, you don't know like their backstories, that maybe like, what happened to them when they were growing up, or maybe God forbid they lost a child, or maybe they're in these dire predicaments, and you understand like the context of the fights, and you understand the trajectories of these men's lives, these women's lives, of these fights. And that's what makes it so interesting to me. It's not just about two people punching each other. It's so much more, right? It's like baseball. Like, you can watch baseball and think, oh, this is boring. But do you see that like the groundskeeper at that park cuts the grass a little bit? He lets the grass grow a little bit longer to like keep the ground balls from slowing down, because that team seems to hit a lot more grounders, or the third base coach is throwing this signal to this guy, or like the battles between the pitcher and the batter, like the guy changing his gloves or the guy stepping off the rubber. So there's all these like different battles happening in sports that make things so much more interesting when you know the full story, right? And for me, that's boxing is just like the ultimate, it's boxing's the truth, man. Boxing's the fucking truth, no matter what. And that's it. That's why it's just so exciting for me.
What do you think about the debate between like MMA enthusiasts and boxing enthusiasts? You think, do you think that those opinions are misguided in terms of people who say like, oh, boxing sucks, MMA is where it's at, or vice versa?
I do. I think it's stupid because I like both. I mean, I like any combat sport, and I'm also really into Muay Thai. I think Muay Thai is an incredible sport. It's incredibly difficult, and those fighters are warriors. And I mean, MMA is absolutely amazing also. But, you know, first of all, to me, obviously, I'm a boxing fan, number one. It's the sweet science is where it's at for me. But I mean, mixed martial arts is amazing. And why would you, like, I don't think that you have to be a fan of one or the other per se, but it's kind of like American football versus rugby. People think like you can only like one, but I love rugby too. They're different sports. You know, they look similar, but they're very different. So, and obviously like a lot of boxing guys or a lot of MMA guys, you know, want to learn boxing because they want to, you know, do better with their stand-up. But those skills are, you know, they can help you somewhat, but MMA is such a different beast because guys can shoot on you and guys can kick. So there's a lot of different skills. I think, to be honest with you, you know, Muay Thai is really the best stand-up art as far as in a street fight or in a cage. But you got to have hands too. So I mean, boxing always has the great stuff, and that's where it all comes from. It comes from boxing also. But I don't see why you can't love both.
David, what's your thoughts on the UFC coming back in 2 weeks with an event with no crowd? And if asked, would you work an event like that in this current climate?
You know, it's interesting. I would have to see what their thoughts are behind it and what the officials say. Again, like, people are in certain jobs because hopefully they're good at it. You know, I'm not a government official. I don't make policy. So if the doctors, you know, because you got to remember, there are a lot of people in close proximity. You're not going to have a referee with a N95 mask on, or the boxers aren't going to have masks on. So there's going to be fluids flying around. There's droplets, as they call them. There'll be a lot of droplets, right? I've been hit by a lot of droplets in my time sitting ringside. Okay? my dry cleaner, you know, has made a lot of money off me with blood stains on my suits. But God forbid one of these fighters has to go to the hospital, you know, and then there's, let's say, patients dealing with COVID. These are all things that they have to figure out. So I'm not, you know, a guy that's in a policy-making position for that. I'm not a politician. I'm not a government official. So, I mean, look, have voice will travel. Like, if they call me, I'm going. But, you know, it's really whatever they decide is fine with me. But hopefully they know the best. Like, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a politician. I don't know. So I'm doing whatever they think is best. You know, if they say stay home, that's what I'm doing. I'm staying home right now.
David, you know, based on your experience within the sport for so many years and just being around all this stuff for so many years, especially obviously at the UFC, it seems like they're going to go forward with this no crowd fight in a couple weeks. And then also professional wrestling, the WWE has been holding their professional wrestling events in front of no crowd. When do you think for boxing, when do you think that like the breaking point would be in terms of where like the executives at Dazn, for example, would say, you know what, like it's been 3-4 months and this thing doesn't seem like it's going to slow down. We're just going to have to go do it in front of no crowds. When do you think that point would be from your personal opinion?
Well, I think right now we've got a fight scheduled July 4th in England. So we'll see if that sticks. But again, to me, is not really a reason to speculate because this thing seems to just move so fast. And like, you know, as Dr. Fauci says, the disease makes the timeline, not us. So, you know, right now, you know, I'm in New York City and we're having a really tough time right now. There's a lot of people, like I said, a lot of people sick and a lot of people losing their lives. And, you know, again, I also just want to give a huge shout out to all the people on the front lines, the doctors, the nurses, all the people that are staying open and serving food to people and bringing packages. And there's a lot of people like, you know, the bus drivers, there's a lot of people doing a lot of tough stuff right now. So really hats off to them. You know, they're putting themselves in harm's way to make life easier for a lot of people. And just shout out to them. But I don't know. It's really about the disease and when, or the virus, and when the timeline happens. So hopefully, this social distancing stuff works, and it flattens the curve, as they say, and hopefully they come up with some type of a vaccine or something, and we can get back to life as we know it. But I think obviously things are probably going to be changed a bit when we come back. But who knows how it's gonna be changed. But I just want people to stay safe, and I hope we can get back as soon as possible, because I know we're all itching, and you got to imagine, like, hearts go out also to these fighters who have been training, and like, this is how they make their living, man. And they these guys were like psyched up for these fights, and now all of a sudden it's like the plug is pulled, and now they still got to stay in shape, because you could get a call any day. It's a very difficult position to be in, so that's tough for them too.
David, who are some of your, if you can divulge, who are some of your favorite fighters at the moment? Especially the younger fighters, maybe like a Devin Haney, who are world champions or something like that. Like, who do you see as like kind of being the man or one of the top champs in the sport for years to come?
I think there's some really promising young fighters out there. Got the light heavyweight Joshua Buatsi in the UK, who's been looking very promising. Obviously, Devin Haney's looking amazing. Teofimo Lopez is looking great. Shakur Stevenson, has been on fire. Murajan Akhmadaliev. So many great young fighters that are coming up. So I think the sport's in a good position right now. A lot of good young fighters out there. Boots Ennis looks great. There's a lot of good guys out there. A lot of young talent. So we'll see, man. I'm excited to see the future.
David, do you think we'll see fighters take the big fights and less warm-up fights due to them losing out on money? And obviously some of them have lost out on 6 months of their short careers.
I hope so. It's funny. It's like, it's not always about the fight. It's not always the fighter's decision. Sometimes it's about the promoters too. And it's also about their managers and about their trainers, their handlers. So they don't always make all the decision. I mean, I like to think that, fighters are just that. They're fighters, and especially a prize fighter, right? That's kind of what a prize fighter means. It's like, guy says, you can fight A, B, or C, and the fighter's like, well, who's going to give me the most money? And he's like, this guy. That's who you go with. You're a prize fighter. You want the biggest prize. And you look back at certain times in boxing, and it's like you had guys that almost more. Of course, they fought for the money, but there was a lot more than about that. Like, the late 70s and early 80s, the light heavyweight division with guys like, Dwight Muhammad Cowie and Matthew Saab Muhammad and Eddie Mustafa Muhammad and Marvin Johnson and Yaki Lopez and Michael Spinks and Victor Galindez and just all kinds of incredible guys. These guys, they all fought each other, and it was a brutal time for that division. Johnny and Eddie Davis, Mike Rossman. I mean, all kinds of different guys, and they had every different style, every different type of thing. And a bunch of them got into the Hall of Fame. But we're living in a different era of boxing, and you do see some guys that are like that. But right now the sport really has become a lot more about a business. But that being said, we still do have those great cracking fights. As fight fans listening, you guys know, because you guys have seen them. They're not always the ones that the top ones on pay-per-view per se, but sometimes they're the club fights. There's great club fights that happen too.
Talking about cracking fights, we were ringside, and I know you were announcing a fight last year where it kind of kicked off. Chavez and Jacobs. I was just wondering what went through your mind when you announced the winner, and then all the beer and the shoes and stuff came flying into the ring.
I mean, listen, I used to work as a bouncer in nightclubs, and I did it for years. And I remember one time I was there's a punk rock band called Fear, and the singer Lee Ving, he was on stage, and it used to be the thing back in the day. Everyone used to spit on Lee Ving. He was basically like, he was like, all right, like, I'm over that. If people spit on me, I'm not going to play. And this place was packed with like 1,200 punks and skinheads and metalheads. and it was a powder keg waiting to go off, and he got out there, and like in the first song, like 10 people hawked loogies on him, and he was like, fuck this, I'm out of here, and he left, and the place just erupted in like a massive brawl, like literally, like I worked this one club. Oh my God, the police, the riot police had to shut down the whole block. I mean, me and my crew wasn't that big. We were in the middle of a massive gang fight. I mean, I've seen 100 times worse, unfortunately. So, I mean, look, things happen. You know, I think Chavez Sr.'s, the picture of Chavez Sr. when he just kind of, you know, looked away, that kind of said it all, right? I mean, you know, here's El Gran Campeón, El León de Culiacan, you know, and his son, you know, gets his nose broken, and he decides to quit on the stool. And the fans didn't like that. You know, they came to support their charge, and they didn't like that. And so, you know, it's boxing. Like, people want to see guys go out on their shield. But the other thing, too, like, fans don't realize, like, I was ringside. I mean, Chavez's nose, like, it looked like it got exploded. Like, his nose definitely was broken. I mean, not that we haven't seen guys fight with broken ribs, broken hands, broken jaws, broken noses, broken orbital bones. I mean, we've seen guys do some incredible things, but you know, the fans didn't like that. So, but yeah, no, I've seen worse.
When I was doing the research for today's podcast, I was looking obviously into your past and stuff like that. And I think I'm right in saying you also used to shovel snow when you were a pizza guy for a job?
Oh, I mean, I've been a bike messenger, a dishwasher, I worked in a factory, I worked in a chicken shack, I made pizza for years. Yeah, I mean, I shoveled snow, I mowed lawns. I mean, I've done a lot of different stuff, you know. Again, get in where you fit in, right? Like, I was just trying to make a buck, you know. So I had a lot of jobs, man. Again, it's that tool belt, right, that I was talking about, that imaginary Batman belt that I wear. So I've done a lot of different jobs, and you know, I've been a bartender, a bar back. I mean, you know, when you got to change a keg, or you got to fill the ice machine, you know, like, you don't realize the stuff that a lot of people do unless you've done it. You know, I was a fry cook on the line. I did a lot of different stuff, man. Did a lot of jobs. Got fired from a lot of jobs. You know. But I you know, I never really took shit, man. I wasn't that guy, and I wasn't gonna suck corporate cock. You know, I wasn't gonna cut my hair or do what I didn't want to do. You know, like, I'm me. Like, I got to stay true to myself, and that's what I always did. And that's why it's so sweet to be where I am now, because I did it my way. And that's just what it is. You know, I just like to keep it real for myself mainly. You know.
Was there ever anybody who offered you a job or a contract to do any type of announcing or anything, but they told you, but you have to cut your hair, and you declined it?
I don't think anyone's ever been that foolish.
I'm surprised. I thought somebody would have maybe told you that once, and
no, but for sure, I think there's been some people that didn't like my hair, but again, it's like, I'm not for everybody. Like,
right.
You know, it's like boxing. Boxing's not for everybody. Like, if you don't get it, you don't get it. If you don't like me, kick rocks. Like, that's cool. Like,
right.
You know, you can go your way. Like, I'm not for everybody. So, you know, if you get me, if you know me, if you follow the sport, then you know what it is. But if not, like, that's cool. You know, people might see me for the first time and think, oh, this guy's a hippie. Like, motherfucker, I ain't no hippie. Like, you know what I mean? I'm not a hippie, that's for sure. But, you know, it is what it is. Like, I just, I've always just kept it my style. And again, like I said, I'm not for everybody, but the people that like me, they're down for me, and I love that. And I appreciate the support, all the people listening out there. Thank you for that.
David, once the coronavirus is all said and done, hopefully in a few months, what fights are you looking forward to?
Oh, man, there's a ton. I mean, there's so many great fights. Look, first of all, there's a lot of guys out there. We don't even know what the matchups are going to be now, because so many different things are switching around. But obviously, you got Joshua's out there, and Dillian White, and Derek Chisora. You got, you know, Wilder. You got Fury. We got Prograis. We got Hooker. Still got Ramirez out there. You got Josh Taylor out there. You got Inoue out there. You got Lomachenko still out there. Usyk still out there. You got Teofimo Lopez. Devin Haney's out there. Gervonta Davis is out there. There's so many great fights. BJ Saunders, Demetrius Andrade, Canelo Alvarez. There's so many mixes and matches. Let's just see. Let's just have these fights. I mean, obviously, Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence. There's just all these fights. Manny Pacquiao still fighting. So there's so many great fights to be made coming up. There's no shortage of that. I mean, bro, straight up, if you look at the landscape of boxing, I mean, just shark-filled waters. I mean, There's so many great fighters out there. And even in the cruiserweights too, with you got Briedis and Dorticos and there's just a lot of great guys. The light heavyweight division with Bivol and Beterbiev and Vodzik and Jean Pascal and Alvarez, Marcus Brown. The super middles, Callum Smith, obviously, Sweet Hands Plant, Billy Joe Saunders, David Benavidez, John Ryder had that great fight against Callum Smith. Danny Jacobs is out there. You got in the middleweights, obviously there's people are talking about Triple G and Canelo again. You got Jamal Charlo. There's so many just great fights. Chris Eubanks trying to get his way into the Canelo fight now, saying, "Oh, you shouldn't fight Saunders," and Saunders made that video with the domestic violence, so he got his license suspended. There's still Jaime Munguia out there. Junior middleweights, you got Jermell Charlo's there. J-Rock's out there. Arislandi Lara, Jarrett Hurd. There's so many great fighters, so many great fights to be made, and the welterweights, obviously, it's such a gem of the division. And Danny Garcia, they're talking about possibly him fighting Errol Spence, and who knows? I don't know what all these fights are going to be. Mikey Garcia's still trying to campaign at 147, so maybe he'll get one of those big fights. Mikey Garcia's, I love him. I don't know if I love him at 147 yet. Mm-hmm. He had that great win against Vargas, but I love him as a lightweight, maybe even at 140, but at 147, I'm still not 100% sold, but he is one of my favorite fighters. But speaking of 140, I mean, to me, that's got to be one of the hottest divisions, and to have a Ramirez-Josh Taylor fight would just be the best. Obviously, Hooker and Prograde's a great fight, so those guys are amazing. And 135, give me a break. You got Gervonta Davis, you got Lomachenko, you got Lopez, you got Luke Campbell, you got Fortuna's that's still out there. Jorge Linares is still out there. Lee Selby is we're gonna do a fight with Lee Selby hopefully in Wales. There's just a lot of different stuff. So there's just great fights out there, man. Jojo Diaz just took the belt off Tevin Farmer at junior lightweight. There's just so many great fights, man. And the featherweights is a gift that always just keeps giving, man. 126 pounds, man. You got some great stuff going on. Josh Warrington, you got Gary Russell Jr., Shakur Stevenson might be, one of the hottest young talents. Kid Galahad, you got to have that. Galahad's got to get that fight against Warrington. He's got to get the rematch. And Warrington just signed with Matchroom, so hopefully that'll happen. Whether it's in Leeds or whether it's in Sheffield, I would love to see that. Carl Frampton's still out there. There's so many great fights. Yeah, I mean, we could go through the divisions and talk about it. Junior featherweight, super bantam. I mean, MJ just took the belt off Danny Roman, and maybe he'll give him a rematch, or maybe he'll fight Navarrete or Ray Vargas. Who knows, man? It's great fights to be made.
As a boxing historian, is there anything that you'd like to achieve in terms of a boxing bucket list, before you retire? Like any stadiums you'd like to announce, any countries you'd like to work in?
To be honest with you, it's funny that you asked that question. I don't ever have anything like that. I mean, I've done. I mean, there's always stuff that you want to do, right? There's always more stuff you want to do, but I mean, I've done Madison Square Garden. I've done the O2. I think I've done the biggest venues in the world. You know, I've done the Olympic Stadium in Moscow. We've done the biggest ones, and to me, the one that I never got to do, I saw fights there, but I never actually announced there, was the Blue Horizon in Philly, the legendary Blue Horizon. That was a place that I wish I could have announced at. I never announced there. Like I said, I saw fights there, but I never announced there. But to me, like York Hall in London, that's like the Blue Horizon of England. And I've announced many fights there, and every time I'm in there, it's so funny because tons of people complain because it's an old, beat up, you know, rickety spot, and there's no amenities at all. And everyone's like, "Fucking hell! Like, we got to be here in this place." And I'm just, and I couldn't be happier. Like, I love announcing fights at York Hall because to me, I'm with the ghosts. You know, it's like. I'm just that type of dude. Like when they tore down Yankee Stadium, like I didn't get it, man. You know, like how you going to do that? And I like those old venues. So, you know, I just want to, like I said, I just want to represent the sport the best way I can. I think that's the best way. I mean, I've done countless world title fights, and I've done fights of the year and things like that. So I host the New York State Boxing Hall of Fame, and I was just last year in the Canastota International Boxing Hall of Fame parade. I had my own float, which was just, I couldn't believe, you know, that was such an honor. I've hosted the Boxing Writers Association of America dinner, the BWAA awards, many years. So these are all things that, I mean, if you had told me this 20 years ago when I started that was going to happen, I mean, I would have never, ever believed you. Yeah, so I've already by far over accomplished what I ever wanted to. So right now everything's just gravy, just being poured. It's just gravy on top of gravy. I'm living the dream, man. I mean, I really am. I don't mean to sound all corny and shit, but I'm really living the dream. I love what I do, and I hope that translates to the fans. And I don't really care about personal accolades like that. Like, it's not about me, you know, like it's about the fighters and it's about the fights. So hopefully I can add something to it, which is great. And I think like sometimes, you know, I love, you know, one thing that I want to bring to it is just to bring awareness of like so many things that have happened in the past, because you get a lot of newbie fans, which is great. I mean, I love that. God bless the new fans, but you want them to see like there's so much that has happened before in the sport. And there's so many stories that you can't even believe, like things that like fights that if you go watch these fights and if you like know the history behind what happened, like you can't believe this, you know. And you see a guy like Mayweather said he's TBE, the best ever. I mean, bro, like I'm not trying to knock Mayweather because I think he's an amazing fighter, but I mean, are you kidding? Like he might be the best ever at making money.
Right.
And he might be the best ever at marketing and selling himself. He was incredible at that. That he was TBE, but as a boxer, I mean, if you go back and you look at different guys, I mean, you know, Willie Pep and Sugar Ray Robinson and, you know, Archie Moore. And I mean, there's guys like Sugar Ray Leonard. I mean, you know, Marvin Hagler, I mean, Roberto Duran, like you look at these guys and the things that they've done over the years. I mean, come on, man. You know, Joe Louis, Muhammad Ali. I mean, I don't know.
Well, on that note, David, we know it's almost midnight over there, so I keep forgetting that you're not on the West Coast with us. But you know, we appreciate the time. We've had you for almost an hour here. Oh wait, I think Mike wants to ask you one more thing.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to ask you before you go. Could you recommend some fights for us to watch since you're a boxing historian during this lockdown period?
Oh, wow. Yeah, sure. Okay, cool. I mean, look, we're talking about, if you want to go old school and we want to talk about some old fights. So let's talk about, first of all, I was just talking about Willie Pep. So he was known as the Will of the Wisp, and he had a 4-fight series with Sandy Sadler. And the first fight, when he went into that fight, Willie Pep was 26 years old. His professional record, just so that people can understand what I'm talking about, he was 134 victories, 1 defeat, 1 draw. That was his record. Okay, 134-1. All right. Sandy Sadler was 22 years old. Guess what his record was? 86-6-2. Okay. And I mean, this was a brutal fight, and it was the very first fight that Pep was dropped. He was dropped twice in the third, and Sandy Sadler stopped Willie Pep in the 4th round. And Willie Pep, he would just had the boxing skill. They used to say, you couldn't hit him in the ass. You couldn't hit him in the ass with a handful of rice. That's how quick he was. Okay. And the second fight he won in a 15-round decision. He won back the featherweight championship of the world. Probably he was the best featherweight champion of all time in an absolutely vicious fight. Sadler took the last 2. Those are great fights if you can find those. Let's talk about Rocky Marciano. The first time he got a title shot when he fought Jersey Joe Walcott. He was 29. He was 42-0. Okay, he got his first crack at the title. This is in 1952. Absolute incredible fight, and a left hook from Walcott, it floored Marciano in the first round. Rocky Marciano, for the first time ever, went down in his career. And I don't want to tell you who won, so you can go ahead and watch it, but it was an absolute one of the all-time great fights. And then, of course, Ali versus Frazier, the third one, the Thrill in Manila, an incredible fight, and that was actually the fight of the year in 1975. If we want to talk about 1975 and 2 Philly fighters, I was talking about the Blue Horizon, Bad Benny Briscoe. He fought Eugene Cyclone Hart. They fought twice, but now these guys, 2 of North Philly's toughest fighters. All right, they're middleweights. This fight, over 11,000 people in attendance. Russell Peltz, the Hall of Fame promoter, was the promoter, and it was actually the runner-up for fight of the year, next to the Thrill in Manila. So speaking of the Thrill in Manila, is also that, and to bring something in, they fought again, Briscoe and Cyclone Hart. Their second fight actually happened today in 1976.
Oh wow!
But that one wasn't as good. The first one's really, really great. The era I grew up in was with the 4 Kings. So Leonard, Hagler, Hearns, and Duran. I mean, there's no way that you can't put Leonard Hearns, the showdown, into that list. I mean, that was for the undisputed welterweight championship of the world, 1981. Sugar Ray Leonard had 1 loss against Duran, and I just want to say, I know that a lot of people are going to think I'm crazy, but I think Leonard won that fight. But whatever. Sugar Ray Leonard's my favorite fighter of all time, and I think he won that fight. But anyway, he had 1 defeat. Hearns was undefeated. He was 32-0 with 30 knockouts. Okay, and bro, that fight needs to be watched. And speaking of Duran, it's like Duran had a trilogy with Esteban de Jesus, which was just, these are, again, talking about the stories in boxing. They first fought in 1972. They had a fight at MSG. This was Roberto Duran's first loss, okay? And he fought de Jesus 2 more times. He beat him both times. The second fight, he knocked him out in the 11th round. The third fight, he knocked him out in the 12th round at Caesar's Palace. But the story is so incredible because, Esteban de Jesus was from Puerto Rico, and obviously Duran is Panamanian, and there was so much vitriol and so much hate between the two. And a lot of the Puerto Rican fans hated Duran because of that. But after the third fight, de Jesus actually committed murder, and he got put in prison. And his brother, he was an IV drug user, and his brother caught HIV, as did he, and he was sick and he was dying. And Roberto Duran went to him. They actually, Puerto Rico let him out of jail because he was about to die. And it was an incredible story. And Duran, hugged him. This was at a time when AIDS there was not a lot of, they didn't really know how you could catch it. And a lot of people thought maybe you could get it by hugging someone. And Duran showed love to Jesus by hugging him, and the Puerto Rican fans, like he won them all back, man. They love him to this day for that. Marvin Hagler, right? I mean, What about his fight with John the Beast Mugabe, 1986? I mean, incredible fight. And I'm telling you, watch the fight, but Mugabe was never the same after that fight. Never the same after that fight. So many great fights. I mean, Salvador Sanchez, one of the great Mexican fighters that unfortunately his life was cut short. But I mean, his fight with Danny Lopez, oh my God, bro, the great featherweight championship fight, 1980. I mean, Lopez was the man going into this fight. He had like 8 defenses going in, and no one knew who Sanchez was. They were like, oh, this guy's going to get destroyed. And Salvador Sanchez what a fight. And his last fight, Salvador Sanchez's last fight, that's a great fight to watch against Azuma Nelson, probably one of Africa's best boxing champions ever. That was an incredible fight for the WBC featherweight championship. Sanchez was just an incredible fighter with fast hands, great counterpuncher, great chin. And when he won that title off Lopez, he did 10 title defenses in less than 18 months. He died in 1982, obviously, but an incredible fight. I mean, prior Arguello, Rafael Limon. I was talking about that great era of the light heavyweights with Cowie and with Matthew Saad Muhammad and any of those fights, Eddie Mustafa Muhammad. Those are all great fights. If you want to watch a really good fight, it was called Pandemonium. It was in 1986. This was Evander Holyfield fought Muhammad Cowie. Oh my God, Cowie was known as the Camden Buzzsaw. And it was probably, your podcast is called The Last Round. Like I said, this was probably one of the last great 15-round fights in history. Because that rule changed in 88, but this took place in 86. This was probably one of the last great 15-round fights in history. Great welterweight fight with Simon Brown and Tyrone Trice. Simon Brown was called Mantequilla, butter. Tyrone was known as Butterfly, and referee Steve Smoger.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is one of his first big title assignments. So you can watch that.
Oh wow!
And, those are kind of older fights, but there's a lot of fights in the newer era. Even we just did a fight in Phoenix, and I told a lot of people about Carbajal Gonzalez 1. That that Michael Carbajal Chiquita Gonzalez fight was really one of the greatest fights. I mean, for light flyweights to perform that way was unbelievable. Everybody knows about Gaddy Ward. But Mickey Ward had a great fight against Emmanuel Burton Augustus. Gaddy Robinson, that was a great fight. The first one, Gaddy Robinson 1 is a great fight. Gaddy fought a great fight with Gabriel Ruelas. Paulie Ayala and Johnny Tapia, that's a great fight. Man, great fight. That was in 1997. There's so many great fights. I mean, and it depends what you like. What you want to see. If you just want to see guys bang, I mean, watch Brandon Rios and Mike Alvarado 1. Remember that fight?
Yeah.
That was a barn burner, dude. In Carson.
Yeah.
That was a barn burner, man. That was a great fight. 2012, man. And oh God, so many good fights. I'm trying to think, so many great fights between Fernando Vargas and Mexico and Puerto Rico, like Trinidad Vargas was a great fight. Vargas Winky Wright, Trinidad Mayorga, Trinidad De La Hoya, Vargas Ike Corte. Man, so many good fights. Speaking of club fights, I did a club fight that became the fight of the year for ESPN. This was a good one. It was at the Roseland Ballroom, which is not there anymore in New York City. It was Pavel Wallach against Delvin Rodriguez. That's a great fight. Really, really great fight. I don't want to tell you the outcome. You got to watch the fight. It was great. Pavel is a Polish fighter. Delvin's Dominican, and the place was going crazy. It was on ESPN Friday Night Fights, and it was a great fight. So yeah, but man, there's so many great fights to watch. I could keep going, man.
No, absolutely. But of course, I'm sure our listeners and us as boxing fans, of course, appreciate such a long list like that in this quarantine time that we're kind of stuck inside. But David, we once again want to thank you for jumping on here the last round. Go ahead and plug your social media. Obviously none of us have anything coming up in terms of events and stuff like that, but go ahead and plug your social media, your cigar lounge that most likely will open in sometime in the future. Go ahead. The floor is yours.
Well, no, I just want to say, Danny Z and Michael Shepard, thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure. Obviously, my social media is at David Diamante on Instagram, and I got a website, just David Diamante, and obviously my tagline, "The fight starts now." That's where it's at. But I'm looking to do something in this quarantine, maybe like a little YouTube channel where I can talk about some of these fights or something like that, or whatever. And so if the fans are out there, if there's something that you guys want to hear from me, let me know, because I don't know what you guys want to see. So if there's something that you want, if you want me to talk about, like, send me an email or send me a DM on Instagram and let me know, because I'd be happy to talk about it. And I just want to connect with the fans, because really without the fans, we're nothing. So, and the fighters, obviously hats off to all the fighters, and I hope everyone stays safe. And again, Danny and Michael, thank you so much for having me on. It's been a real honor and a pleasure to talk to you guys. And I appreciate what you guys do. And you have some great guests. So thank you so much for asking me to be on. I'm very honored for that. So I appreciate it, guys.
We appreciate that. You take care.
All right, man. The fight starts now.
You got it. I liked him, man. My favorite interviews are always the ones where we don't have to do any talking. We just ask them the question and they let loose. Those are always the easiest interviews, right, Mike?
Yeah, I completely agree. Definitely up there with one of my favorite guests we've had on in the 18 months we've been going, nearly 2 years it is.
Yeah, the fight starts now. I like how he ended it right before he hung up. With his tagline like that. But, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, we're going to most likely be doing the show remotely. Hopefully this sounds good. I mean, it sounded good when we were kind of testing it throughout the last few days. But I think we should save kind of going into fights and stuff like that maybe for next week. I mean, there's nothing going on anyways, in terms of events. So, the more content we have, obviously, I'm sure our listeners would appreciate it. We're obviously, like I mentioned initially, I think I mentioned it, that we're just here to try to provide content for you guys, especially the frontline workers who have to still go to work every morning, every day, or whatever, every night, every afternoon, on your drive to work, on your drive home. We're still trying to put out your content for you to kind of get your mind off of the negative side of life that's currently happening. But Mike, go ahead and let our listeners know once again where they can follow us.
At The Last Round 12 on Twitter and Instagram. And if you have any ideas of people you'd like us to interview, don't be, just reach out to us, send us a DM, send us a message on any of our platforms, and we'll try to get whoever you guys want.
Right on the money. Right on the money. So for once again, I'm Danny Z. For my co-host, Michael Shepard, this is The Last Round.
Thanks for supporting and listening to the show. Follow us at The Last Round 12 on social media. Rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Last Round